book, a lie, in a world that changed forever. Imagine living in a world where a single book could turn your neighbor, your friend, and even your own family against you. Hey, welcome back. This is my new podcast series, Echoes of Deception. And for those of you who haven't found my storytelling channel yet, it's on YouTube and it's called the Geezerville Chronicles. In one of my playlists, you'll find podcasts, and in the podcast area, just click on Echoes of Deception and you can catch up on all the latest episodes. So that's all for now, and let's begin, because storytelling is one of my favorite things ever. In Latin, it's called Malleus Maleficarum. In English, the title is The Hammer of Witches. And today we're going back in time to the 15th century, and we're stepping into a troubled mind of a man who wrote one of the most dangerous books in European history. And the reason why is because it established a prototype or a blueprint for mass deception, a how-to manual on fabricating enemies, selling fear, and weaponizing belief. In this first episode, I'm asking one key question. Was Kramer just a product of his time, or was this demented author something darker? Was he a psychopath in a priest's robe? Who was Heinrich Kramer? Well, we know that he was born in 1430, 10 years prior to when the Gutenberg press was invented in Germany. He was also a Dominican friar. He was a Catholic clergyman and who later became an inquisitor in the Holy Roman Empire, which today would be modern-day Germany. We also know from what he left behind that he was a fanatic, and he was obsessed, and he was primarily focused on heresy and witchcraft. Now, heresy in the 15th century was extremely serious for a number of reasons. If you are accused of being a heretic, it could be for numerous reasons. You spoke against the teachings of the church, which was considered a destabilizing influence on the entire community. If you denied the fundamental premise of the Holy Trinity, for example, you were a heretic. And the punishment was severe. Now, usually the clergy conducted the trial, members of the church, but the general public carried out the punishment, the secular arm. And in those times, the church and the secular ruler of a country, the governance, were intertwined. Even back in, I think, 1252, Pope Innocent, one of the numbers, I don't know which, he actually legitimized torture. And you could torture someone according to the doctrines, and if they confessed, mercy could be granted, but it wasn't a guarantee. And so that mentality was ingrained in who Kramer was. Now, another aspect is his views on women were extreme. He was clearly misogynistic. He believed that women were naturally weak, they were overly sexual, and they were prone to evil influences. And today, if you looked at anyone with that kind of a profile, they would be considered most likely to be a psychopath. And we're going to explore that in a little more depth. Why? It was really because his behavioral patterns, his obsession with control, dehumanization of others, lack of empathy, and manipulative reasoning. Those are characteristics that fit into the modern day definitions of psychopathy. And what makes it even more chilling in that era was that he operated under the banner of religious authority. And that gave him legitimacy or power. And that's what's danger when you have a disturbed mind given the tools for institutional enforcement. Let's take a look at some of Kramer's own words. In there's a quote that I found, and I'm going to read it here. It says, "All wickedness is but little to the wickedness of women." And he wrote pages about how women were morally weak, sexually deviant, spiritually dangerous, and he believed the only solution was torture, trial, and execution, usually, as I said prior, by fire. And so this wasn't just a theological mindset in Kramer. It was, I think, fair to say, sadistic, and it's a sadism that's characterized or disguised as piety. I mean, I think he probably felt he was making the church great by his actions, making the population safer by his actions. And this is where a psychopath in a position of power, not leadership, but power, authorized and sanctioned by the institutions of the time and culture, why that is so dangerous. Now, let's go to the next part, I think, to validate what I've just said. We can't know for sure about the man, right? I mean, we really can't, but his book was clearly a handbook for hunting and executing witches in his time. And so I think it's important to spend a few minutes on the book itself, how it was structured, and what its content was. Because again, this book was printed. And even though the church didn't actually, there's no evidence that I know of that the church sanctioned his beliefs in the end. But it was printed and it was disseminated throughout the middle-aged towns and villages all around Europe. And so if you think about it, it was a body of lies that were amplified by the technology of the times. And this is one of the first examples that I personally know of where this is the case. And I guess the way, if you're younger listening to this and the printing press doesn't mean much to you, think about it in terms of social media. You can publish something, print something. It doesn't have to be true. It oftentimes isn't true. It's somebody's bias on information that they have, and they a lot of times believe in it. But the danger isn't in the freedom to do that. The danger is in amplifying that message because it causes other people to act on it. And that's the real danger in this idea of amplifying lies, and how one person, just one person, can influence history over decades of time. So let's look at the structure of the book. This is a copy of the book that I purchased on Amazon. I'm trying to get the light correct so you can see it. Malleus Maleficarum by Heinrich Kramer. And it consists of actually 3 main parts. And each part consists of numerous chapters. I think there's 36 chapters in one and 26 in another. And each chapter has a specific question that it deals with. Whether the belief that witches exist is so essential to the Catholic faith that obstinately maintaining the opposite opinion manifests heresy. So it's whether that belief manifests heresy. That would be a question at the beginning of the chapter. And then all this was written in Latin, of course. So what you see here is a translation. And that question was then answered, and then it rolled on to the next question, like whether children can be generated by devils and witches, why women are chiefly addicted to evil superstitions, and it goes on and on and on. So there you have it. You have a very well thought out structure, actually. He needed to validate witchery. He needed to connect it to evil forces in nature. And then he needed to have a way of dealing with it and punishing it. Now, I'm going to read in the back of this particular translation, I'm going to read something here from the last part of the book. It says, a theory on why the vast majority of witches are female is offered, rooted in the presence of women in the biblical canon. Towards the end of the book, Kramer contends that witches are created from a pact made with the devil himself, with whom they engage in sexual relations. The witch is then summoned by flight to an evil assembly headed by the devil, encouraged to practice illicit forms of sex, and then granted the powers of a maleficent magic. Excuse me for that screw up. Now, this is interesting. In this particular book it says, today Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, is considered to be the single most complete source on Christian attitudes to witchcraft and demons in existence. So I find this whole thread very interesting and compelling. Here you have a man who grew up in a small village in Middle Ages near the Rhine River, and he joins a Dominican branch of the church and becomes a friar first. And then he's obviously very motivated. And the reports are that he was fairly good off the pulpit. He was inspiring, engaging, and he could pull people in. So in that sense, I don't know if that's some weird form of charismatic behavior or not, but he was very effective. So here it is. This man grows up with this mentality in it, and he gradually refines it, and he internalizes it, and it becomes an obsession. And then something happens after he's made an inquisitor, and he brings a woman to trial. And something happens in that trial that I'm going to include in a future episode. So that's a teaser. It's really fascinating. And then when that upset in his career path happens, he takes it as a major assault on his own integrity and his own belief system. And so then it's after that that he goes to Innsbruck and he cloisters himself away and begins writing this book. Now, if you examine the book, it is rigorous, it is dense, it has a lot of citations trying to support points of view. It isn't just some flippant weird thing. It was thoughtful, it was purposeful, and it was directed toward an objective he had. And that objective, in my view, it was revenge. And revenge against whom? Well, we're going to explore that in a future episode. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this. And the next episode, I'm trying to commit to a time frame that there's at least 2 every month, maybe more. They'll usually be posted and scheduled for post on Tuesdays. And I'm not going to make any further promises for these podcasts other than that. And there's now more than 12 in the series. And they'll tie and bring us forward from 1487 up to the current time of 2025. And the cast of characters will interact over that entire spectrum of time. So please join me. And if you can subscribe, it would be very helpful because it supports my ability to continue on this forum. Again, thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Every day is special, and it's your turn to make some hope and share it with somebody else. Thanks a bunch.